Welcome to another episode of the Veriswap podcast. Today we have Joel, otherwise known as the Stats 23. He hails from Illinois, and we met at the National last week. How's it going?
Great. I'm just happy to be here. Thank you for having me on your podcast. I've watched it in the past iterations of it.
Awesome. Yeah. So a little bit of context of like how me and Joel met. I met a few friends that I met my first national ever in Chicago a few years ago. And, they stopped me at trade night, which was crazy, by the way. And Joel was standing there. We talked. He had some really awesome cards in his collection. And, one thing led to another, and he is on the podcast. So for those who don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about your background in the hobby, how you got into it, and kind of your journey from the beginning to present day?
Yeah, like many people, my story begins when I was a child, probably in my, could be 10 to 12 years old. It's all a blur at this point. My brother got some packs of cards for a Secret Santa gift from one of his classmates, right? And we ended up opening those packs. I was jealous of those cards that my brother got, and that began the whole path for cards. So from there, I ended up meeting some friends along the way early on, and we started to collect together. Of course, we went to like a local card shop. We'd be buying stuff in the late 90s, mid to late 90s. I was just getting a couple packs here and there, so we really weren't able to get that much. But of course, we knew of like a lot of those 90s grails. Typical story. Mine's a little bit different because when I went away to college, you kind of stop, but I didn't necessarily stop. I kept an eye on it, and I kept picking up things and being active in the hobby throughout the time. Just didn't really have much money, so I just always kind of watched what was out there. But lo and behold, got my first job, and was kind of aligned with the time that Lebron was getting into the league. And guess what? I went full on. I should say that during that year, I was buying getting back in, buying things online during that LeBron's rookie year. Didn't really have any friends, went to a shop in the area, and it kind of sparked something into me. I met some of those friends actually that you met at that point.
Oh.
And those kind of friends kind of stick with you, right? And
yep.
Many years later, I ended up being full on in the hobby. I never would have expected to put the collection together that I've had. And I haven't stopped ever since. It's just been something I've attended many of the nationals. There's a few breaks I took during the time when we're having kids and the like, and just things don't line up. But it really just led me to today, and I still love it. And I don't know if I'll ever stop. And I don't know what it'll take to have me stop.
Yeah, I feel like people always say that they're going to stop, and then you see them like 2 weeks later posting on Facebook trying to buy more cards. So it's you say that, but it's never going to happen. What was collecting like in 2003?
What'd you say?
What was collecting like in 2003?
Collecting in 2003 was a lot. It's funny because it felt extremely expensive. Like, right, you were at the time, Exquisite collection came out, $500 a pack or a box, right? And which seemed absolutely ludicrous. I'm sure you've heard this take from many people. Things just did not seem like something that would happen. Ultimate was top of the line before that, but the Carvin, as he's talked about on many different platforms, when they introduced Exquisite, they knew it was going to be something above and beyond. And it took some time for that adoption to happen. And I don't know, it's funny because everything seems expensive relative to the time. So even back then, even though we look back and things seem cheap, things definitely felt expensive because you only have what you have, and it's only worth what it's worth. And so if you need to sell something to buy something, you don't get to sell things at the numbers you sell today, right? So you're still kind of buying something that's relatively expensive compared to what you were buying previously. So it's funny because it felt similar, but it felt attainable back then, is the thing. So I think there was, I knew if I worked a job and I saved some money, I could use my money for my job to kind of buy cards. Whereas today, I feel like, I don't know what you can buy with just your income. Like if you're not supplementing it with other cards or things like that, it's tough. Yeah. So it's definitely just more expensive today, but I felt like we had similar issues back then, but it just grown so much. I think before, the thing that I really felt was we felt like we were hiding our collection, right, from people. We didn't really want to talk about it openly that we collect, because it felt like something that we shouldn't necessarily talk about. and so people be like, you're a collector, right? And we kind of talk and talk amongst each other. But today it just seems like something open, like, hey, it's another market. You can talk about, whatever angle you want to take on it. It seems like something that people are willing to listen to, at least if you sum it up to some level, or willing to hear you out about what's going on. And it's a fun thing. So I think it's different on that aspect.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that it's different nowadays because like people, they are kind of more proud to show their collections. Do you think that's a function of like, people getting older, and like kind of caring less about what other people think? Or do you think it's just like cards and culture has become like a little bit more popular and it's like kind of now cool to collect these pieces of cardboard?
I think it's a little combination of both. I think the fact that cards can stand on their own as investments, quote unquote, there was many a time that I would see people just laughing at the idea of cards being investment quality or investment grade or those type of terms being used and scoffing at the idea, right? And mind you, of course, you should always have your traditional investments and go that route and take your chance along the way. I think today, with as much as people love or hate Gary Vee, I think he really brought to the forefront the idea of finding alternative means of income and other income streams, right? And I mean, cards can he definitely spent time and openly talked about like the potential in it. And I mean, Ken Golden, great, definitely spent time on that front talking talking about the hobby, looking to expand the hobby. I mean, once you see cultural crossover into cards, I mean, it's definitely helped make it seem like it's something we can talk about more openly. And I think because of that, people are like, hey, since there's less people that might be thinking that we're something about because we collect cards, I think we can deal with less people saying that rather than more. And I think that the percentages have shifted a little bit more towards being a collector and doing those types of activities.
I see. Okay. So it just seems like generally people are have been more accepting. Yeah, I would say I agree with that. I also think like, I think the part you mentioned about like expanding the size of like the entire pie is not really talked about enough, right? Like oftentimes we kind of talk about cards in the context of like, the card community. But what about like kind of like the crossover between like, other sorts of collectibles or like, other forms of culture, right? Like I feel like you had a really good point there where it's like, okay, like there is a lot of crossover. And there is a lot of potential in the space too. And I feel like a lot of that potential is untapped right now. So let's talk a little bit about your collection. What players do you collect? Just a wild guess, Jordan from the jersey background.
Yeah, this might help. Yeah, basketball tends to be my focus. It's funny. Many years I started the Jordan route. Jordan was just too expensive. Even at $400 an auto, felt really expensive at the time to be getting those Bulls autos. And when they dropped to 300, we're like losing our minds. Like, oh man, Jordans are gonna be worth nothing,
Yep.
And so for me, the timing of coming back in around the time that LeBron was drafted, and the buzz that caused, I mean, firmly put me in the LeBron camp. And it actually took me a few years to get into LeBron. So I mean, at first I was like, man, he's coming in young. He looks way too he's way too hyped and this and that. So I waited a couple of years before diving full into LeBron. Like, so if I pull something, I'd be like, oh, cool, I can sell it and buy something Jordan or just use it to buy a bunch of other rookies I believe in, like when I believe like Carmelo or Wade, just because they seem like they had a lot of upside as well. But eventually, I mean, there was just a point where LeBron won me over, and just seeing consistently how he was able to lead that team, it seemed like his athleticism was unmatched. And when he was young, I mean, just seeing him jump through the ceiling was out of control. Like he could jump out of the gym, and it seemed like he was just every year he was improving his game. And once I saw that, and I saw he was actually a leader, was when I decided to jump in. I'll tell you, those Heat years were tough. Like I stayed the course with LeBron through those Heat years, and it was tough. I mean, I sold a couple things off during that time whenever I had the chance, because I was like, not too sure, but I really did stick it out through those Heat years with LeBron. But aside from that, it took me a long time to get on to the Steph Curry train, because when you're a LeBron fan, moving to Steph Curry is really tough, because those years, yeah, I mean, I definitely had some feelings about Steph stealing some rings away from LeBron during those years. But once I separated those feelings, I was like, listen, Steph Curry is making his own legacy here. And I went all in and started picking up Curry, a good amount of Curry, because I just really believed in what he was putting together in his career. I mean, along with that, I take my shots on some rookies along the way. I mean, I definitely had a Andrew Wiggins collection early on.
Andrew
I had
Wiggins.
John Wall collection early on that I jumped into because of their upside. And hey, the Wiggins stuff actually, I think I actually made a little bit of money on that now from what Andrew Wiggins.
You still have them.
Well, I ended up moving a few. Yeah, I had them all through those years. And it's funny the way that the hobby went, because basically the high prices I paid in 2014-15 season ended up being just the prices that they are today, because the whole market went up. You know,
There you go.
It was my chance to get out, I guess. So I sold a couple things. But I still like Wiggins. I still have a few things in the closet.
I see. What's just curious? What's your favorite Steph Curry card in your collection? And the second question is, what do you think the most underrated Steph Curry rookie is?
That's tough. So this might be a hot take, but I've never been a fan of the Topps or the Topps Chrome. To me, I didn't like that picture when it came out. I'm not going to say I like it now.
Yeah.
So, like, I can't. I always prefer the autographs, and I think that was a weird time for cards, because that year was the first year that was the transition from Upper Deck to Panini for basketball, and Panini was kind of finding their way with basketball cards at that time. So I don't know, a lot of the designs left a lot to be desired. I mean, because I didn't think they were necessarily always planned for the autograph space on the cards, right? Or they would just say, like, okay, here's design one, okay, let's add a jersey square to that, and then let's add an autograph on that design as well. And it would just be, you can't even see the auto. It would be tough. So I mean, a couple cards, one in particular that I really enjoy is the Classics Steph Curry auto. And actually at the National I had a PSA 10, and I was able to add the autograph grade to that, so I got a 10-10.
Oh wow.
Which is great. So I think that might be my best Steph. Like, so I don't really have a ton. Sadly, at one point I did own a National Treasures. I ended up trading it for something crazy at the time. Like, I think I traded it for like Jason Hayward stuff and just a whole slew of random things. Like I bought it for like $400, so traded it for $600 in trade. I'm like, hey, how do I pass that up, right? So yeah. Unfortunately, I've never owned a National Treasure since. It just kind of kept going up, and the years I could have attained it, I was too busy hating on stuff because it hurt my Lebron collection, you know. But I think along with that, the next one that I really enjoy is the Crown Royale rookie. Yeah, and just because I had a chance at the National buy one, I should have. I kind of regret not grabbing that, just because I think that one's kind of a nice design for the year, on card auto, fairly limited. Definitely a card I like. So I would say, I guess, undervalued. And I can say a card I don't own is, I feel like that Crown card falls in that category for me.
Yeah, I think the Crown card is like actually like very, very. It looks very, very cool.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if like that design would like fly today, just because it's like so cheesy, but like it's kind of one of those things where it's like it's so cheesy that it's cool.
I mean, Preferred has tried to bring it back. I think that they still have it. They haven't made it as die cut anymore. They have it's just basically the full card, but they have the design of the crown in it.
The full card. Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So it's like less out there.
Yeah.
I really like that card too. It's certainly beautiful. My personal favorite, I think generally, I think like a really underrated card is just the Donruss Next Day autos. It's like the first on card auto, first professional jersey card for every single player in basketball, and it just looks so clean. I've always been a huge fan of those. I don't personally own one, but I feel like
that's definitely a nice
really
one. I had a friend who pulled one, and I mean, to this day, he still thinks about that card, like move it, because it just didn't seem, when you pulled out of the box, there was no real provenance on the next day. I mean, I guess there was like the past the Upper Deck, they did some of that with drafts classes, but of course, we were too fearful early on, or ripping, you have to sell things when you rip boxes because you have to get your money back or whatever, or can't eat the whole cost. So along the way, but yeah, I agree with you. That's a great card too, and they're really rare.
Yeah, you need to grab one of those. You need to grab one of those soon. Let's talk about the National. How was your experience?
It was great. I think this year I really focused on just getting out, talking to people, trying to talk to people I didn't talk to before, which is like where you and I kind of met this year, which is great through friends and just being open to talking to people, different people than the people I came with, right? Sometimes in the past, I felt like I kind of just stuck to what I was doing, just did the promo lines and didn't really get out there and talk. So overall, I think it was great to walk around and just talk to new people. I thought the show itself was great. I have to say, I really felt like Zerocool put on one of the strongest booths out there. And in my opinion, like for those who went and saw Zerocool, they kind of stole the show. I think just the whole ambiance of the booth, the music and the way the music aligned with what all the promotions that they were doing. I mean, the Stranger Things giveaway, I know everyone's talking about the cards and what those are doing and how great that is, but the actual vending machine that they put together for Stranger Cool was insane. Like if you watch season 4 of Stranger Things, the whole setup, the whole framing of the vending machine that you had to use, and even inside, like having the smoke inside of there with the lighting to match like the Stranger Cool's atmosphere. Stranger Things atmosphere was insane. They did a great job, and I think many booths are going to see that, and we're going to see that people upping their game more in the future. So that was probably the standout of the show for me as far as booths go.
So maybe I'm misunderstanding, but there was a vending machine why was there a vending machine in the Zerocool booth?
Great question. So the way that I don't know if you saw people lining up for the Stranger Things promotion at times. So when you're lining up, they did about 50 people that would get one of the Stranger Things packs. And when you went through the booth, they wouldn't just hand you a pack. You had to go up to the vending machine and select a number to get your pack, with the chance that not only do you get your 2 cards, you could have a chance at getting a pack that gave you a redemption to get a full box of cards. And so that's what they put in the vending machine. So it was kind of random and you choose your fate.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Did you line up and did you get some cards there?
I did the first day. And definitely wish I went back, but I didn't want to commit that much time to it in the next days. But I was really happy I did that early, because that was just a great experience. And, they had a lot of benches out there for you to so throughout the show, you could just go there just to give your feet a break. So I did that a few times, and they had chargers there available. So I charged my phone and along the way when I needed throughout the day. I mean, they hit it out of the park and really made it an experience. Something different than what I saw at previous nationals.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You mentioned it when you mentioned Zerocool, since mainly my friends there, they only do sports. So I was really surprised when you mentioned Zerocool, and I kind of wish I had checked it out. I'd seen kind of their ads, the Stranger Things out on the wall, and the Dune cards.
Yeah.
But actually, didn't walk in.
Yeah.
But it looks like I'll have to add it to my list, my list next year.
Yeah.
I personally was really impressed by Whatnot's marketing campaign. They had huge signs everywhere. They had some sort of carnival booth game near the Breakers Pavilion. That was pretty cool. It seems like they really put a lot of thought and effort into the design of the thing. It must have cost them a pretty penny.
Oh yeah, I mean, Whatnot definitely raised everything to a new level for the show. I mean, just the fact that the main stage was all Whatnot sponsored. They had the huge booth where you could play games. They had all the sponsored breaks. I mean, it was very, very impressive. And I mean, as many people are talking about, next year they're expanding the corporate sector of cards, and man, it's I think everyone's going to be raising their game if they're on the corporate side next year. I think it's setting the bar high.
What do you mean by quite corporate sector of cards?
So next year at the National at Rosemont, they're adding more space specifically for corporate next year. So I think they're planning that there's going to be more expansion within that sector.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I had brought. So I'm working on a project called Veriswap. It's an online trading platform for cards, and I brought my 2 partners on the project to the show, and that was one thing that they told me that they were most surprised about. They kind of initially imagined to be kind of a big flea market where people would just set up shop and try to sell stuff, but they were surprised. It used to be like that, right? Not sometimes even at local shows, you see these larger companies set up now. So they were most surprised by the amount of infrastructure that had that was built in the hobby, and the amount of professionalism, that it's not really that big flea market type style community anymore.
Yeah, it's definitely growing. I mean, we saw the growth last year. I mean, it was seemed like it was really stepping up in 2019, but yeah, I mean, I hope we don't lose the essence of what the national was in the future, and it becomes just very institutional, and we lose like the all the haggling on the show floor type of thing, because that's what the bread and butter is of it all. So I mean, I hope we don't lose that, but there's definitely room for growth and more professionalism in it all. And I think there's some strides in that direction are a great thing, and it really, as we talk about speaking about the hobby openly, right, and where we are today, I mean, that kind of thing like makes it a lot easier to talk about today and really helps bring it to the forefront.
Yeah, I think like, yeah, I think these companies bring collecting to the forefront is a really great thing, because it kind of gets people. I mean, like if you think about it, like you're kind of like at a sports card show at most 1 week out of the year, right? Like at least a national one week out of the year, and like including all the smaller shows, like maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks out of the year, right? All of this other time, like you're at home, right? So if like you can be involved in the hobby, and I think like a lot of what these companies, collectible, whatnot, like what they do is they make like the sports card hobby more accessible when you're like not at shows. And I generally see like a trend towards that direction. So I think like that makes the collecting hobby a lot more it takes up more of your life, right? It's not a weekend activity. It's a Monday through Friday. You're sitting at your desk, your boss isn't looking, you're on your phone, trying to buy some cards, type activity.
Yeah.
Did you pick up any nice cards at the National?
Yeah, I ended up picking a nice Jordan autograph. It's funny. It's because of like one of the dinners I went to, I met a guy, and he showed me a picture like, man, I'm trying to trade this Jordan at the show. And he's basically told me like, I'll take trade and whatever. And I'm like, cool, we'll see if we can work something out tomorrow. Ended up being the signature kicks set from out of Goodwin. It's the exquisite signature kicks from 2019. Really cool piece, and I was happy to make a deal for this. That was probably one of the coolest cards I got, and I was able to do mostly trade and throw a little bit of cash on it. So really happy to get that. It's funny, for being a non-pro card, is probably one of the closest to I've seen of a pro Jordan auto out there. So I was happy. That was probably one of my bigger cards I picked up at the show. I think I picked up a couple other things I just can't even remember right now.
Too many, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I think those Goodwin cards are definitely underrated. I think actually just found out this year that they all come from the same box. Like they mix all the sports together. I did not know that. And I think like the shoe patches, especially, like sometimes you see like the Jordan logo, and the patch one is generally pretty big and they're pretty solid. Yeah, I think those cards are awesome. Definitely underrated in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm hoping one day people just decide like, hey, we don't need, I focus more about how the card looks versus like the logos or this and that, right? And I mean, I hope that we can expand what we think is good in the future.
Yeah, definitely in the future. I feel like people, I think it depends on, I guess the collector base, right? Like if, a lot of true collectors who are, true sports fans enter, they'll probably care less about the licensing and, more about like who signed it. Whereas like if it continues, obviously like there is currently a gap between like licensed versus unlicensed cards. Yeah, but like I think like if you were to show that card to like someone who like wasn't in the hobby, they would not even know that there's no Bulls logo on the card.
Yeah.
Like that's like, because like when I first got into the hobby, I saw one of those cards and I sent a photo to my friend, and then he was like, oh yeah, like it doesn't have the Bulls logo on it. And I was like, oh, like now I know, right? Yeah. But like, that's not the first thing that people see when they look at the card, right? They see, the bold blue auto, they see the patch, right? It's only like hobby, like I guess people who are really, really particular about, the teams they collect. I guess they care about the licensing. But I feel like it shouldn't really be the case.
Yeah, I mean, Upper Deck's done a great job of making that transition and making pieces that make people think a little bit more of like, do I need have that, to see that prominent Chicago Bulls logo on a card when like basically everything's pointing to this being has a great autograph, great design, everything. Yeah, no, I think that they understand. I hand it to Upper Deck. They're working well with what they have.
They're working well with what they have, certainly. Do you think there's like anything that they can do in the design that like can kind of like go into the gray area of like making it seem like a Bulls card, but like not really?
They've
Like,
tried that, and I think they definitely do
they have.
color. They can do that with color schemes on the card, which they've tried. You can do it where I think the Leaf game where you kind of turn the player a little bit, where like their arm just manages to cover like part of the jersey, right?
The jersey.
There's definitely things they can do, and just make it not look like you're just like, you know, wiping out that logo. So like just waiting their head to turn just enough where you can't see it. I know Leaf has definitely tried to challenge and push that rule about needing the trademark or not very, very well. And I think that's one thing Brian Gray has been really great about. And I think he's a pretty smart guy. He's definitely learned how to work those angles. And if he needs to take on a lawsuit, he's willing to. I hand it to him. He's a bold guy.
Yeah, it's kind of creative. It's kind of a creative game at that point. Mm-hmm. I've seen like the baseball ones where it's like they cover up the logo. You know, I think for baseball they edit, or I don't know if they edit, but like, you know, they use the city name instead of the team name, right? Like for Mike Trout's prism, it says Los Angeles, or like Los Angeles Baseball Club, something like that. Maybe there's something you can do with the Jordan to make it, or they can do with the Jordan to make it seem more Bulls-like.
Man, I remember when Panini jumped into baseball, it was rough when they were using Josh Hamilton as their as the main player that they would show on, and it literally was like players standing in like jerseys with no logos, and they thought they were going to make a splash in baseball. But I mean, they've come a long way. Flawless baseball looks pretty dang good compared to what it used to be. Or like the baseball products they used to release. They've done a great job of really making you think and be like, hey, this looks pretty dang pro, pretty close to pro.
Yeah, no, I agree. I see some stuff and I'm like, oh, like this actually looks really, really good.
Yeah.
I think the hobby should definitely move towards collecting unlicensed stuff, because it's like, you know, I think it's currently a steal right now. And you can certainly get really good bang for your buck.
Yeah, if you have the willingness to wait, I think that's not a bad move to make at the price levels. You can pick up some of that stuff, but you cannot. I mean, of course, you can have your quick flips for a little bit more, but if you're looking for the bigger game, that might be a longer wait and see on some of those pieces.
Exactly.
Especially key pieces.
Yeah, for those key pieces, patience is going to be important.
Yep.
You know, before this, you're telling me about a story that happened to National. I think it would be cool to share it. Just kind of hear your experience as well.
Sure. So as you know, many people who come to the National when they're traveling, many people leave early, right? And so a lot of people are out either Sunday morning or Saturday night. So sometimes there's gaps at tables, and sometimes dealers will sell you some space or something if they're looking, they know it's a slow day, and it gives you an opportunity. So we actually, a couple friends and I, we went around and we're looking to see if any dealers are willing to sell us a little bit of room to set up for the day. When generally we like to walk big shows. In the future, we might want to just set up for the weekend, but this one we decided to just walk. So we ended up finding a dealer who's willing to sell a space on their table to set up for that Sunday. And so my friends and I, we set up for the day. It was fun. You know, we didn't really sell too much, but it was fun to just have somewhere to sit and hang out. But we did have our cards out on the table. One particular interaction that happened was my friend had out a few of his Ohtani cards. In particular, these ones were signed by the artist. And the artist of those cards was Mayumi Sato, was her name. So he had them on the table, and he actually had one out that she signed in English, and then he had a couple out that she signed in kanji on the case. And we actually got that done. Topps had her signing at the booth in Cleveland, I believe, in like 2018. So we had a few of those signed by her there. And so there's no real authentication on the autograph per se, but we know what they are, and my friend sells them for whatever price he knows, and consistently sells those. Anyway, this person came up to the table, asked my friend about the cards, and my friend specifically told him, like, as he did every person that came and asked, because Otani's such a popular player, I'm like, just these cards are not signed by Otani. These are signed by the artist, and Mayumi Sato. And he asked, okay, so what are the difference between these, right? And so my friend's like, well, this one's in English. And then he's like, yeah, well, what about this Japanese one over here? And my friend said, like, well, the kanji one is X amount, right? Whereas the English one costs this much amount, and that's typically what I sell them for. And the guy kind of got a little, he's like, oh, kanji, interesting, kanji, kind of with a little smirk on his face. And anyway, he starts then getting into like, well, how much do you value that autograph? Do you have the card? And my friend's like, I don't know. I know I sell them for this amount regularly. That's how I value it, And the guy's like, well, how much is the card worth? And he says, like, well, my friend's like, well, the card typically sells like this. And the guy, like, of course, kind of goes into like, well, if you're saying the card's worth this, then you're saying that's worth that, right? And my friend's like, well, I don't think about it that way. It depends on which card it is, and it can vary based on what they typically sell for. Anyway, so nothing really got done. That guy kind of like packed up his stuff or whatever, and then kind of moved on. He actually moved over a couple tables, and he decides to start dealing with some people, walking up, well, whatever, like no one's saying, we're not saying anything. He can, there's space there. So he just opened his case. He's just buying directly from people walking around. And out of nowhere, he's like looking at some cards in this one of the people he's dealing with cases. And he's like, hey, Kanji, get over here. Kanji, get over here. And my friend, I got to show you something. My friend kind of looks up, like a little bit kind of confused. And then he's like, I think he kind of hit my friend, like, that guy is calling me Kanji, right? And my friend immediately gets heated. He's like, what are you saying to me? Like, you're calling me Kanji? And he gets over there and he confronts him, being like, my name's not Kanji, you know that. And like, you do not get to say the things, and this gets heated. Like, you don't get to say, you don't call me names. And it got very, very heated. And I ended up having to pull my friend away and just basically tell him, like, this guy his excuse was saying, like, he thought my friend was saying his name was Kanji. Clearly through the interaction, he did not think that. And he got my mind even confused. Like, maybe he thought my friend's name was Kanji. I don't know. I was trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. So anyways, after everyone got separated, I told my friend I had to sit down. My friend was very upset. I talked to my friend about it. I'm like, why do you get so heated? Words are just words. And my friend told me, it's like, if I don't stick up for myself in those situations, they're going to think that he's going to think that he can push around other Asian people or say whatever he wants to say to other people. And like, he needs to know that I'm willing to stand up. And it really did hit me and realize, like, he's not getting that mad for the sake of himself per se, or completely from himself. He's looking for the perspective of this guy's insulting who I am and insulting our, potentially insulting a race. Like, what other kind of things he's saying to other people, and that really struck a chord with me and made me realize, and many great people as we have in this hobby, and it's been growing, and we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We still have our major gaps. Like, there's some gaps in between, and I think we have a lot of growth to do at times. I can think of other stories at other times throughout the 20-some years I've been back fully in cards. But guess what? I think the majority of my interactions have been great, and a lot of great people, a lot of people I love working with, and I will call my friends. But you never know. Sometimes there's that occasional interaction that reminds you, hey, guess what? Sometimes the people, no matter how nice they are to your face at first, your skin tone, what your background is, whatever experience they had in the past, can come back. And it's funny because I immediately started thinking about in my past growing up. My father always told me, like, listen, you're Indian, you're brown, whatever you say, doesn't matter how American you are, doesn't matter how you talk. There's people out there, that's the first thing that they're going to see, the first thing they're going to react to. And so what you have to do is you have to make sure to represent the race well by, in some cases, whether it be like paying, like say we're going out to eat, it's like give them a good tip or this and that, so they know like, Indians are not cheap or this and that, and like they don't have those things. And I carried that many years. I was like, I don't want people to see me as cheap or this and that because I'm Indian, and it stuck with me, and it made me realize like, why do I have to defend my race like that? Like, why is that on me? Why do I have that on my shoulders? And it's because of like moments like this that makes me feel that way. But in reality, we shouldn't, right? Our marriage should stand on their own, right? And I think that interaction brought so much of that to light. Now, was his intentions to insult my friend racially? We don't know. Did he insult my friend racially? Yes, definitely. So there's a level of, could it have been ignorance? It could have been ignorance and just him just not understanding what the meaning was and think it was an interesting word. But we don't know. But it's not our job to figure out his intentions all the time in the moment. So I know I said a lot there.
I think like when I first heard the story from you, like I was very surprised. As someone who has been doing cards for full time for about 3 years now, and my Instagram name was Asian Cards. I hadn't really experienced that level of blatant racism in person at shows. I would get like nasty messages like all the time, like on Instagram, on Facebook, but not necessarily at shows. And I think like generally, like we live in a society where there's like people are very, very open to saying things on the internet when they're hundreds of miles away from, thousands of miles away from that person hiding behind a computer screen, right? But when they meet up in person, it's they're all friendly, they're all really, really nice. So I was very surprised when I heard that, and I think like what that teaches us is like, in the hobby we still have like a lot of room to grow, right? Not only to like, I guess like, keep existing minorities, like Chinese people, Indian people, make them feel welcome, but like to not alienate other people who want to join, right? Like there's a huge collector base in China, right? What are they going to say when they hear that like people, like this racial incident happened in Jersey City, right? Someone who's very passionate about basketball might not care, but like someone who's kind of on the edge, they wouldn't feel welcome, right?
Yeah, they wouldn't feel welcome in those kind of public venues for sure. I mean, we want people to feel that those are not fair. Collectors can just be collectors with each other, period. Nothing else matters. Exactly.
Like one of the things I love about this hobby, I was actually talking with Eric Myers, who works at PWCC, about this, is like, I love that when we go into the show floor, we can leave all of our differences at the door, right? What we believe in, what our jobs are, all of our problems in life, right? Once we step in the door, it's all about cards, right? But I think, for, the 0.001% of people, it just doesn't happen. And I think like, there's, I think like, yeah, like the only way to combat it is respond, right? Yeah. Like I think a lot of times the easy thing to do is just laugh it off, not be confrontational, and not try to stir any problems. I think especially in Asian culture, right?
Yeah.
It's like if someone insults you, you just kind of
brush it off.
Just brush it off, and move on to the next thing. But I think there is also the point. It's like, okay, like you wouldn't want your kid to kind of like be subject to the same thing, right? And at some point, like these people have to learn that like saying something like that is not okay, and they should really think hard again if they want to say something like that.
Yeah, and that was my friend's point. The reason why he stood up, and it just hit me. Man, I'm wanting him to back down, but I guess I'm wanting him to back down for his own safety, for not causing a scene and the like. But like, a part of me regrets like even the hint that I didn't fully support him. But my goal was to make sure he was safe and get him out of there safely, and that has been eating at me since that event, because he's standing up for a reason, standing up for something to make sure that no one thinks they can do that to anyone else.
Right. Yeah, I think like, yeah, his perspective on, making sure that it doesn't happen to anyone else. Like I definitely agree with, but I also kind of see how like how you would also like want to intervene, right? Like kind of like what you said, regardless of like what like minorities do, there's always going to be some sort of perception, and like had it escalated farther, had it you know uh maybe turn into a fight, like I could very easily see the story being spun to like something like, oh, like your friend didn't understand, Asian people didn't understand what this other person was saying.
That's exactly it.
So that's why he got into a fight. It was all miscommunication because he couldn't communicate well, right?
Well, so the back end of the incident, we had a dealer who was upset that we were causing commotion. And, as I mentioned earlier, we kind of bought the space. His first thought was like, hey, you guys are over there, just set up. I'm going to get them over here to kick you guys out if you're doing that, and don't cause a scene and really, and I told him flat out, first of all, we pay for this space. Second of all, something happened here. All right. Something major happened. It's not like so we were being blamed for the commotion, right? But we have a right, or he has a right to stand up for what happened. And I think ultimately the dealer walked away because I think some people tried to get out of there that were at his booth, just for safety purpose or whatever, like came back later. He was upset about losing the business, right? And ultimately later, I think after that kind of sunk in with that dealer, he came back and apologized to us, knowing kind of what happened and what, and he apologized and said he was sorry for that. And even the two younger collectors who were with that person who was dealing and whose cards he was looking at, they came over and apologized, saying that they had nothing to do with that guy. So they saw what happened and they didn't want any part of it. So there are many people with great hearts in this hobby, and I don't want to take away from that because I think we've grown big time. I've met so many lifelong people that I would want my life in cards. Like, so I don't want to take away of all genders, race, etc. I've met so many great people, and I don't want to take anything away from that. It just, we don't need these types of interactions, and I would love to see this go away because there's so much growth that we can have in this, and we limit ourselves. There's so much growth we could even have in this hobby, whatever you want to look at it. If you want to look at it from a business sense, if you want to look at this from a person just caring about humans, there's so much growth we can have, and there's so much available for all of us if we allow for it.
Yeah, I definitely agree on like kind of like the growth of the hobby, right? Whether it's just personally kind of like learning about cards, about sports. I will say that like 99.99% of people in this hobby are good.
I would hope so. I think so too.
Like, yeah, like it just happens to be like that 0.001% that kind of like puts a bad taste in your mouth. And like an example of this was like this has actually happened a few months ago to me. Like someone had sent me an Instagram message out of nowhere. He was basically like, he was like, you cheap Asian or something like that. And I posted it on my story. I was like, this shouldn't be happening. Like I feel like we've gone so far in society, but to have this happen, like if you're gonna say it, like at least don't say it to me behind a computer screen, right?
I don't know. I think either way, I think if you're gonna say it, you need to rethink your life.
Yeah,
there's no reason for you to say it to my face.
Yeah,
there's no reason for you to think it, or at least if you think you're cheap, just think I'm cheap. Don't think I'm a cheap Asian, right? Just think I'm a cheap person.
Yeah. But I guess like my point here was like like when I posted the story, like 50 to like 70 people responded to that story. They were like, yeah, like that is not okay. I'm so sorry you experienced that. And it was like, and then everyone's like started like like commenting on like that guy's posts, saying like, oh, don't buy from this guy, he's racist. So I think like my intention definitely like was not to like stir drama or basically like get people to get people to berate, the person who said something like that. Rather, it was to just draw attention to the issue. But I think the fact that like a lot of people responded positive, like expressed support, at least like made me feel a lot more, made me feel optimistic about the future of the hobby.
Yeah.
And this also happened to be like a weekend I was at a show, so like I think at least like 3 people came up to me. They're like, "Oh, I saw the nasty message that this guy had sent. Really sorry that it happened. Just realized that like that's not representative of the hobby at all. It's just always a few people, a few bad apples."
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, and I hope that we can maintain that rosy outlook, right? But we see more of this, it might end up skewing our perspective, right? But in general, that's where I stand too. Like my many years, and I can deal with people who have questions. If people want to learn and approach it from a stance of like, hey, I don't know this, and I've many years, I think intent, I look for intent, right? Like, so for me, if you have positive intent and you're just looking to grow and learn, or, if you're someone I've known for many years and you make a mistake, I'll take the mistake. That's okay, right? But there's a difference, right? And we know when someone's looking to laugh either with us versus at our expense, we know the difference, right? And we can tell. And when you're laughing at someone's expense or laughing at something about someone, then that's you're kind of pushing it too far there.
Exactly. Yeah. I think the first step is also just like make sure like stuff like this like doesn't happen behind closed doors. I mean, there's no way to make sure, but just like try to make it so it happens less behind closed doors. Because like if someone wants to say something like that to your face, imagine what they say to their friends.
Yep.
Or imagine what they say to someone when they're not in public. Yep. Right. And then I imagine it's the type of thing where it's like, okay, like it becomes kind of like a habit, and then it's like, okay, you're at a show and then you blurt it out, and then nobody's everyone's upset.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. I didn't expect to have this experience at the National. I can't remember experience as close as this one that hit me so hard as this one did, in that way. I mean, I've had other instances, or I'd say I had maybe one instance many years ago where I felt like someone might have had some feelings to me because I was like a younger collector, and I back when eBay was full pop per se of like quoting eBay prices because people were still by the Beckett. There was a older collector or someone who was set up, and I mentioned like, well, on eBay this hurdles for this, and that set him off on me bringing up eBay. But that felt very much like, okay, that was more because he was upset that he was unhappy. Like he says, listen, I priced by half Beckett. I don't go by eBay. I don't care what eBay says. And I told him like, I understand your opinion, but you have no right to disrespect me in that way. And at that time, because we're talking many years ago when I was a young buck out there, and I felt like this kind of like this purely of like I was a young guy. He kind of felt like he could say certain things to me because he was more of the older guy, more experienced guy. Different avenue, and I was able to take that and express myself. And I think in a way I caught him off guard that I expressed myself clearly at the point that was disrespectful. I didn't do anything outside of telling him like that was extremely disrespectful, which caught him off guard. And I think we have a right to stand up for ourselves, like whatever the reason is. Like if you feel like you're disrespected, there's a way to responsibly stand up for yourself. I'm not saying to come to fists or whatever it might be, but you can say that someone is being disrespectful, like if you believe so, if you truly, or at least get clarification, like, is this what you mean? I don't see anything wrong with that. Well, there's no reason to back away.
Yeah, at least no, I completely agree. I think at the end of the day, in this world, regardless of like what decision you make, someone's always going to disagree with you. Someone's always going to criticize you. So at the end of the day, you just have to make a decision that lets you sleep at night, right? If you feel comfortable, like doing, like standing up, not standing up, right? Like as long as you can sleep with that decision, then that's what is ideal.
Yeah, great point. Yeah.
But yeah, we are coming up on time. Where can everyone find you if they want to reach out to you, hear more about your stories, your collections, etc.?
Yeah, you can reach me on Instagram, username thestats23, so THESTATS 23. And you definitely send me a message. We can talk about it. talk about anything. If you want to trade or something, trading is always hard, or sometimes I don't always have the time just because, you know, day job, etc. to trade and like, but definitely open to have some conversations.
Yeah, and who are you mainly looking for when you trade?
Good question. I think right now I'm kind of into some of the younger guys, trying to get into some Anthony Edwards a little bit. Definitely like I have my share of Lukas, so I've been going down that avenue, and I think I'd like to get some more. So looking for some nice Lukas stuff, some Giannis. Mainly basketball, kind of branching out from there. Anything
Cool.
basketball, mainly autographs though. I tend to do autographs and love the exquisite stuff. Definitely sticks out. So
Nice. So mainly basketball stuff. Reach out to Joel if you have anything in those in that alley.
Right. A broad alley, right?
in that very, very, very broad alley.
Yeah.
Message him, hear a little bit more about his stories. And it was great having you on today.
Hey, appreciate it. Thanks, Raymond.
Take it easy.
See ya.